Hello, everyone. I am just trying to see if I've got everything here that we need to see. And we won't start till 2, but I thought that I would go ahead and get started with seeing if it is in focus. Okay, so as soon as the other ladies get here, we'll get started. It's not quite 2 o'clock here. Hello, Annie. Hello, Andrea from Argentina and Patricia. Hello, Maria. Thank you, Maria. So it's 2 o'clock on my end. Eileen was going to introduce me, and if she's there, I'll let her go ahead and do that. Hola. There you are, Eileen. You'll see on the screen here a painting that I did of roses. This has no background or anything, so I thought that this might be a good one to start with. So if you want to, I can pause a few minutes. Hi, Ekta. I can pause a few minutes and then they can translate if that would help. This painting was done all with a color called ruby and soft rose. And so that's the colors on this piece here that you see. And one of the things that I find in painting is you can't paint what you don't understand. So I'm going to show you how I see a rose and what I use for inspiration. First off, I like to work from photographs and collect good photographs. So you really have to understand the structure, and one of the best ways to understand the structure is to have good photos, but also you can do something like sketch over a photo to familiarize yourself with the shapes of the petals. What shapes are those petals? I should probably do that in another color. Some of these photos I've taken, and some of these photos, this is one I took in California. So you can see a lot of different angles and petals. This one, you have to learn how to edit a photo. Sometimes it's too square on one side. So I might add another petal coming off the edge like this. You can see it in red right here. This one is interesting as well. This was all in red. But now I'm going to show you how I sketch one. But before I do that, I'm going to turn the camera around for just a minute so that you can actually, well, you're seeing a little bit of my studio. And I can say hello, hi, and welcome. I feel it's a privilege to be asked to do this, and thank you so much for having me. Now I'm going to go back to my painting. All right. So next thing I'm going to do is show you how I sketched them. And I'm going to do that on a piece of paper first. So looking at a photo or just from memory is mainly the way I do it, but you can also look at a photograph. The first thing I do is sketch where the center of the flower is going to be. This also gives me direction. It shows me which way the flower is going to point. Then I find the width and the depth of the bowl here on the flower. After that, I just sketch an interesting outside shape. And I normally do that with a brush on china instead of a pen, but you can get the idea here. So if you look, the depth here and here, and then the depth here and here may be a little bit different, and we want that. We don't want, and then this is the center axis of the rose. This is the point of attachment. This is where everything grows from. One of the things that it does change when we're doing a side view or a rose that's upside down, as some people call it. So I start with a curve and another curve and another curved line. In these areas, this is where, between these, is where the calyx goes. Then I start drawing V's or angles, and that helps me to get the shape of a side view. And draw back at the back, a couple of petals coming off the back. Then this tells me where petals go. Here's one, here's one. There's one in between. Here's one, here's one. There's one in between, and one, and you get the idea of how you can draw quickly a side view rose. Now, over here, if I want a bud is an egg shape. A bud that's opening is a little bigger, so you would have petals maybe that are folding back from it. But one of the things we do is we do not want this to be divided in half, so when we cut a petal, make sure that you cut it off and away, not right down the middle, because then it splits it in half equally, and that's not pleasing to the eye. Here, you might just see a calyx or two here. If I wanted to add another bud, I would add a smaller bud, and this one then would have a calyx that is going up on top of it because it is still somewhat new. I like to call this married, teenager, geriatric, starting to almost like flop apart there. And so you get the idea of movement now. Also, if you see the placement of these flowers, here's one, there's one in between like this. It's like a triangle, and that helps you in placement. Then when I'm going to do leaves, I draw a curved line and another curved line, and then those lines here then become the center veins of the leaves. It also prevents your leaves from looking stiff and static. Now I line the other way, and these are the minor leaves that are going back behind the flower. So another thing is, when I placed this, I wasn't really looking at it good enough. I don't want this one looking exactly the same direction as this one here. So I would then probably move one of these where it's not looking straight across from each other. But mainly this was just to show you how I sketch or draw a rose or what I'm thinking. Because again, like I said, you can't paint what you don't understand. So in here with this rose, this would be a petal, this would be a petal, this would be a petal, and they stop at this, what we call ball or bowl. These are the petals that are on the outside, so they are not going to overlap that. But here's a petal, there's one in between, here's a petal, so then these will overlap. Okay, so now I'm going to show you on my painting. And if we have time, I will show, if you see in the background, you see other paintings that I have done with roses. And one thing about roses, they just fit just about every little subject. And I do small roses as well as big roses. And so you can get all these wonderful shapes. This I painted in what I call an old master style. Okay. Sometimes I paint in an impressionistic style, which is this. A little bit more impressionistic, a little bit more loose. And this is a box, actually. That's the side of the box, and this is the top of the box. This is all done with soft rose and soft pink. So I'm going to show you a little bit before I actually start the painting. So here is another one that I've done. And unfortunately, this was done in a seminar, and the kiln was opened, I think, when it was too hot, and the paint cracked in half. But you can't see that. I still like the painting. Okay. And that was with a white rose. All right, so I'm going to do this one just a tiny bit different than this one. I'm going to show you this rose here, but I'm going to paint it a white flower. Then I'm going to paint this one the ruby, and then this a lighter pink. Just so you can get some ideas on how to paint some other colors. All right, so I have different brushes that I use. But I pretty much paint all my roses with these. I paint all of my subjects, really, with these four. This is a 5/8, this is a half, and a 3/8. This is a 6/0 Dresden liner, and then this is just a scroller that I use for sketching and stems. So I'm going to start with the bigger brush for laying in. And then I will use this one and this one to wipe out, and sometimes I use this one to wipe out. But let's start with laying in some color. For depth in the center, you have to have more than one color. You can't just use yellow and just yellow. So I will be going from a yellow to a pecan to a yellow-red. And that's the colors that I'll be using in the center. For the outside petals, or for the petals of this flower, I'll be using yellow, blue-green, and soft pink, which is in this family here. So you see it's all in the same color family. So let's begin. Mixing yellow. I do a flat load of mixing yellow on my brush. And that means that the brush is loaded flat. I believe loading your brush is important, so I'm going to show you that too. Here it is up here. So I'm going to lay the brush flat into the paint and pull straight down. Then I'm going to side load into a little bit of the pecan right here. So now I have a double load. I have yellow and pecan in the brush. And I'm going to lay that in a diamond or wedge stroke. And I'm going to load my brush each time. Now then, I'm going to clean my brush and go into mixing yellow. Again. Now then, I'm going to take that mixing yellow into 3 places. I'm trying to see where you can see it better here. Into 3 places. That's 1. This is 2, this is 3. And you can sort of see a triangle of motion with that color. All right, the next color I'm going to use is soft pink, which is the lightest value pink I have. And I'm going to put that into 3 places. 1, 2, let's see where else I want it, up here, 3. You could put it in more places if you want, but the thing is I don't want the sizes of these colors to be equal. The next color I will put in is a blue-green, which is more blue than green. And I'm going to put that in now. In 1, that's 1, 2, maybe 3 places here. Now I've left a white spot there, but I'm going to be pulling in color and blending it. Now this is, at this point, is what I call an educated mass of color, or you could say mess. Anyway, so now I'm going to lightly take the brush and soften these colors, and I'm cross-hatching. When I'm cross-hatching the color, it prevents me from making stripes. And you can see that I've pre-sketched with paint my design. I prefer to sketch with paint. That way the lines can move. And if I want a little bit more pink in this flower, I could add just a tad of soft rose or a mid-value rose color. For you to see it, I think it needs to be a little darker. Okay, so then the next one underneath here is going to be my ruby rose. So I use a ruby color, and I'm again using this big brush, and I'm making a wedge stroke. Now I'm loading the brush full load and making these wedge strokes. 1, 2, 3. Do you see how they're fanning out? Then I'm going to turn the brush over, because that's where the color is, and put a little bit of more up in here. Now loading the brush again. Pull straight down for the bowl, or the front of the flower, some people call it. I'm from the old school where we called it a bowl. And then pull these wedge strokes again on the outside, but stop before you get to that ball or that bowl. And up here they're smaller. Out here they're wider because it's going at the widest part of the flower, and then they cut back in again. And now then I'm just adding a little bit more color if I feel like I need it. I like to have a lot of color from the beginning, because when you start wiping out, you lose color. Are there any questions so far? I want that a little taller, because I want this to feel like a round ball. If I was to put a line around that, you would see it makes a ball shape. Okay. Now then, this is what we call a side view, or a turn back. Some people call it rose. Let me find one here. Photo. I take my photos and laminate them, and that way they don't get messed up in travel. Okay, here is a side view. Now this one has a lot of points on it. Maybe I don't want that many points. But look how on a white flower, all that different color is on a white flower. It is not gray. It is not painted with gray. It's painted with different colors. Here is another side. Here's a couple more side views. See the V's that you see in here? Quite a few of them on this one here. Here they're not as prominent. This one is a little bit more flat, a little bit more open. But you see how the calyx wrap back towards the stem. They wrap back towards the stem. They don't wrap up around the flower, because at this point that flower is pushing those calyx back. So we're going to make this flower a lighter pink. So I'm going to use soft rose, and I'm going to do a big C stroke and another C stroke and another C stroke and another C stroke. Then I will start making those wedges again. Now I added just a little bit of ruby here so that that ruby reflects onto the flower next to it. Back to the soft rose. Wedge. Sometimes I'll do a flat stroke or a square so that I don't keep doing the same stroke or the same shape over and over and over again. Now then, I'm going to lightly blend these colors together. A little bit more depth here. These are not refined. Bear with me. These are just blocked in at this stage. At this point, you can change it. You can tug its ear. You can make it do what you want. But it already should start to say rose before you ever wipe out anything. Now over here, I'm going to use the soft rose for this little bud here that is starting to open its petals. And so you get the feeling of a bud that's starting to open. And again, over here, this is just an egg shape. Sometimes you can see the center, where the center is, so I'd make that darker and pull out a petal here and a petal here, pulling it down into here and one up here. That's too pointed, so push it back down. It's not set in stone until it's fired. So those are roses that are just now blocked in, and it didn't take me that long. The thing is with this is I like the paint to rest a minute before I start wiping out, because that way I find I get a nicer, cleaner wipe out. Also, you'll see on my plate that I have it divided up into 4 unequal parts at 12, 3, 6, and 9. By doing that and then drawing this grid, it helps me to place my flowers better than if I was just to start painting. Also, this main flower, it goes into all 4 quadrants in that grid. The secondary flower here is in all 4 quadrants, just a little bit, but still there. But where the larger area here is, that quadrant, most of them are staying within this quadrant between 3 and 6. So I hope that helps you with dividing up the space. The oil that I use when I'm painting is a product that is made here in the United States. It's called Terpenoid Natural. I use 4 parts Terpenoid Natural, 1 part Balsam of Copaiba. The reason I like that, it dries and it'll stay open for the day, and it seems like I can get more paint on with it. But another one that you can get a lot more paint on with is any medium that is Copaiba based. So use your medium of choice. I tell you, the trick is really in laying in the strokes, and it's sometimes in the medium, but not always. But the medium that I do not like to use is straight mineral oil. I don't think I can get enough color on when I use the straight mineral oil. Now then, before I start wiping out these roses, I'm going to sketch where the stems go, and I'm going to use antique green. Now, I make antique green. I don't buy it. I use a grass green or just a leaf green, a green that's a true green, and add pecan or yellow brown number 2 to it to make my green. And it's much prettier than the antique greens that you buy. Now I'm going to take that and put it on a liner along with a little violet of iron. And that's going to give me a nice stem color. Sometimes I use ruby, but I'm using the antique green and violet of iron. Now you see I turn the plate because I want to pull these stems in an arc or a curve towards the focal point. These are the lines that lead the eye into the painting. Now, I've been told, oh, don't make a pitchfork. Well, that's not a pitchfork. I'm from the country, and if it was a pitchfork, these would all end at the same line, and they don't. And also, I like to sometimes put another branch that's going over this. Now, a lot of this is going to turn into leaves. If I want a little bit of ruby in that, I'll add that to the bottom. This is ruby I've got on the brush. To the bottom of that structure there. Off of this is where I will draw a curved line and where these leaves would go in a painting, and I don't want them pointing off at 12. So I've got it going past 12. And down in here I want to lead the viewer in, so I might put a leaf not coming from that stem, maybe from this stem. A leaf coming down into this area here. Here I'm going to add a grouping of leaves, so I'll give me a curved line. And I'll draw the opposing lines like I showed you in my drawing. And then these become leaves. Now sometimes I'll put 4, sometimes I'll put 3, sometimes I'll put 1, maybe the illusion of 1 going back here. But that's painter's choice. Now I have a grouping of leaves on that original painting going right over this, but I'm not going to put them in until I wipe out this flower. So you want a triangle of motion with your leaves too. So I'm going to put another grouping coming right here. Now you might hear my puppy dogs. I have some puppy dogs that live with me, so anyway, if you hear one, it's from my house. Okay, so now then you see I've got the shapes of the leaves and the roses sketched in. But now then I'm going to work from the back forward. I'm going to do the leaves first, and then I'll wipe out the flowers. That allows the flowers to set up. Another thing is when I do a seminar though, we just do the flowers and wipe them out, fire it. Sometimes we tint the plate if we're going to have a background. And we fire it, and then we put the leaves over the fired background. And that way, when you do it, you get all of these wonderful layers of color in the leaf structures. In this one, I used ruby and black for the back, darkest dark, and we start from the behind and go forward. So here we go. That's why I sketched the leaf structure, so I know where I'm headed. So here we go. I'm using ruby and a little bit of black. Now, some people use black green. I like black, but I put very little black in it. When you're loading the black in the brush, you want to make sure, here's my ruby down here. It still looks ruby when I add the black to it. If it doesn't look ruby, then I've got too much black added to that. Okay? And use what they call a transparent black. It's not a black that is opaque. Outlining black is an opaque black. Opaque meaning it's not transparent. Now you see I'm painting in between these shapes that I put in. And what I will do after I'm through with this and fire it this evening, I will come back on here, and I will post the finished painting, the finished first fire anyway. This painting has 2 fires. That's it. 2 fires. This painting has 4 fires. You get a lot more depth. But also doing the background, it takes a little bit more time. You also, instead of using the black and the ruby, you can use the black green if you feel more comfortable doing that. What both of them do is they gray that ruby and keep it from being too intense. Now see, I haven't got any leaves painted here yet, but I want to find the depth behind that flower. Now what I'm doing is moving that dark through the painting in this S pattern. And I've only been doing this 30 minutes with explanation. So down in here, I didn't really have any leaves. Most of the leaves are up here in this part of the painting. Now, if I want to change the color a little bit, I am going to add some black green in here in between. I also want to thank Maria Fernanda for allowing us to come on here and asking us to do this to promote the art. She's doing a great job of promotion, and thank you to the ladies who are helping out today as well. I really appreciate it. Now here I'm pulling out some shadow shapes of leaves. I like to start always with a idea or a sketch and not just start doing this blind. I've done it blind, and I do that a lot sometimes, and sometimes I wish I had not. I wish I had started with a sketch. Then I can pretty much see what the design's looking like without just having to add and kind of paint by the seat of my pants, which means without a plan. I have a saying: those who fail to plan, plan to fail. Now you notice when I was putting this in, I was using that smaller 1/2-inch brush instead of the 5/8. Now that I'm going to paint some leaves in, and on this painting I'm going to be using antique green and ruby, and a little bit more ruby in there so you can see it. Antique green and ruby, a little bit more ruby. Come on, get some on there. All right, there we go. And I'm doing a C stroke towards the center vein and away from the center vein. I have video on painting leaves that I sell, and I also have a video, full-length video of painting roses. But in essence, that's what we all that are watching anyway, you're interested in roses or you wouldn't be watching. So 2 C strokes, then I'm cleaning the brush and blotting the brush, going into chartreuse now, and pulling that wedge stroke in. And that is leaves that are blocked in, not refined yet. Then I will also pull some of this color from the background onto the leaves. So that's why I put the background in first before I start blocking these in, so that I can see what color I'm getting. Now that was just a little wedge stroke. Leaves that are layered on top of each other create a lot more interest. It creates depth as well. Sorry, I bumped the tripod. All right. So these are all just blocked in, doing the same thing that I did before. What I'm trying to say too is don't just get caught up in one style. Play with impressionism, play with more realism. It's up to you. Paint what you like to paint. That's what's the beauty of art, is all these beautiful renditions of roses or whatever you want to paint. At this point, what I call this is my educated mess. It's not finished. It's an idea. The difference between the difference between a sketch and a drawing is a sketch is pretty much what I've got going here. It is an idea, and then a drawing or a finished painting is next. So I've changed those stems a little bit that I put in, and then I also want a stem that's coming down into that flower. But before I wipe out the where the calyx go, I will leave that alone for a minute and then wipe out. So now the paint has had a chance to set. And also in the background now, I'm going to carve out some negative shapes of leaves. And I just use a cloth. This is actually what we call here a Viva paper towel. It doesn't have a whole lot of lint. It works for me. I don't use a wipeout tool when I do this most of the time. Every once in a while I might. But this pulls off the color as I do it. And when I'm wiping out, I'm pulling that towards me. Those little shapes of light in between. You also can use a little bit of what I call tongue oil. Some people call saliva, some people call spit, but it's something that is a universal solvent. It cleans up everything pretty darn well. So now then, I've already creating more depth, you see, with layers. Here's a layer, here's a layer, here's a layer, here's a layer. More and more, it's layers that create depth. Now then, I'm going to wipe out. This is with my ½ pulling out light now in these leaves. And when I pull out light, I'm thinking about light moving through the painting. And here, doing little wedges, wedge, different sizes, different lengths. Then come back and soften the edge. And it gives you the illusion of veins. Also, I like to use the wipeout tool on the outside edge of my leaves to give me a little bit of that serrated edge. Also, when I do roses in a few minutes, you will see if I use a wipeout tool, it's only on the outside edge of something. It's not on the inside edge. Come back and lift out a little bit more light. Now, if you had background on this piece, the colored background, then you would be lifting back to the color that is underneath it. And that's how I had that blue and those other colors in the leaves. Now I'm going to use a little 6/0 pointed brush. I'm going to bring this up a little closer. And I'm going to pull through that center of that leaf and lift out some light veins. Roses, their leaves are not dark in the centers, usually in the veins. They're lighter. Unfortunately, I don't have any roses growing right now, or I would show you. And that gets rid of this dark shadow that's running through the leaf too. But when you're doing it with a clean, dried brush, you're pulling some of that color with it, so that works. So now you can see this leaf grouping that is wiped out. And you look, they're not straight across from each other, they're not flat, 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 and that's intentional. There's some great rose painters out there, and the reason they're great is they have practiced. Not only when you practice and you teach, you get better and better. The future of our art is teachers. We need teachers. When COVID happened, I started doing seminars online on Zoom, and that's been a fun thing for me. If you're interested in Zoom, you can just contact me, message me, and let me know you're interested. We're doing one right now on morning glories. But now you see that's wiped out like that. Now then here, there's light. Oh, look at that light. See that beautiful light as it moves through. It's all about the light. But that you don't divide the leaf half light and half dark. I will come over here and bring a little bit of light on the other side, but not in the same amount. In all art forms, it's all about the light, whether it be our art form, oils, or watercolor. And I do all of those. I do watercolor and oil and China. Now, you see how that is now moving through in the painting after you get the leaves done. Now I'm going to draw a little stem here and pull out light on these, or pull out the veins in these. All right, now I'm going to lift out light in the stems up here. And push, push, push. And then sometimes pull. But it's more of a push and stop and go to another spot and push. That way they look more woody. They don't look real rounded. And you can see those stems I put in really were just for placement, and actually they help to lead the eye in. Now, the part you've probably been waiting for, and I would clean up here and play with it a little bit, but sometimes I even lift out a little bit of light in one of these shadow leaves a place or two. Studying the old masters, they did that. Okay, now I want to show you a close-up My oldest daughter, when she was in high school, she took some of these pictures. And you can see in this picture, let me see if I can get it out of this sleeve so it's not so shiny. This is a really good one to show you how the petals look and how they roll. Do you see that? And see how the light hits the top of this one and then it goes into shadow out here and then picks up a little bit of light again. And in here you can see how they overlap and they stack like brick. Here is that rose, not blown up at a different time of day, so it looks a different color. But you can see, here's a petal, here's a petal, here's a petal, there's one in between. Or you can go, here's a petal, there's one in between. They stagger and they stack like brick. On the back here, she did some extreme close-ups of how that light hits the edges of these flowers, but also the petals. But see how that light meanders and moves through that flower. It's just not trapped in one spot. The same thing up here in this photograph. You can see how that edge is what we call rim lighting. That's light that is bounced light. It's coming from hitting a petal from here and bouncing up into that. And here you can see how the different shadows that help to separate the petals. So have some good reference material. It's very helpful. Here's that rose when it was about ready to fall apart. The more open they are, the more oblong they are, the more mature the flower is. The tighter the flower is, the less mature. All right, so here I'm going to wipe out that main flower, which is probably what y'all been waiting for all this time. Going back to my 1/2 inch. All right, so I'm going to wipe out the center first. I'm going to start at the top where I drew that first line, and I'm going to slide and roll. That gives me a petal that's sliding, or at an angle. I'm going to find that center of that flower again. I call this a bench. It's kind of like, if you look, here's the seat of the bench and here's the legs of the bench, and they're kind of spread out. That tells me how spread out these two lines are, tells me how open that rose is. Then I'm going to come in and wipe the outside petals. I work the inside first and then the outside. So here's the inside. Now I'm going to wipe out with the scoop. Whoops. Scoop. It's that wedge again, but I'm pressing down with the back side of the brush. Oh, I got some of that ruby in there. That's fine. I like that in there. Now, I don't want a fan. So see, that's starting to create a fan shape. So I come in and I manipulate an edge or two and stack them now a little more, and they won't look like a fan anymore. Now that I'm going to wipe out the outside petals because it tells me where the inside petals need to go. So I'm going to push out and blot the brush and pull back. Push out, wipe the brush, and now make another little curved there. Push. Maybe I want this one to come all the way over there. Now these petals are the ones that are going to be going across that rose. These are the petals that are on the outside of the ball of that flower. Sometimes I'll rock the brush out, and that works really well when I'm doing this side of the flower. It tends to be, my harder side is my right side on the rose. The easier side is my left side, and that's because I'm right-handed. So it would be the reverse if you're left-handed. Now I'm curving that petal a little bit, pulling this petal out now. When I pull from the inside out, that means I'm not pulling that color from outside inside. So in other words, I'm not stretching this color in. Now then, I'm going to do the petals that are on the inside, the rest of them. So here's a petal. Here's a petal. So there would be one that rolls in between. Maybe another little minor, smaller petal there. Another one here. Rolling them out now, because as they come across the front of the flower, they roll out. Now it's painter's choice how many petals you want to put in a flower. Now I'm going to wipe out the center. So now that I'm going to do short little C strokes on the inside. Before I go too far, let me put a little yellow red in there for depth. There we go. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to pull out this petal a little further here. There we go. Now the white rose is finished for now. Now that I'm going to do the side view, this ruby side view. So when I put it in with ruby, I'm going to wipe out with soft rose, and that gives me a two-tone color. So I'm going to pull from the bottom up on this one. That's finding and establishing that ball shape on the bowl. Now then I'll come in and do my bench. There's that rolled petal with soft rose in the brush, not cleaning the in-between. Dark flowers do not have usually white highlights unless there's an extreme light source. Now I've got the inside painted and the outside edge. Now I'm going to do the outside edge of this petal and overlap that ball just a little bit. Overlap that ball just a little bit and then pull out and rock the brush. In other words, make it go a C curve. That creates that light that I showed you on those photos. Push, pull. Push, pull. Maybe I want another one in there. Push and a little pull. Now in between here and here is another petal, and I'm going to roll that brush out. See, I have too much light out on that, so I'm going to go back with some color. Now then, I want this to be lighter on that side, so this side is where I'm going to put a little bit more petals. All the detail is in your mid-tones. There's no detail in your darkest dark or your lightest light, so remember that. Now, the inside. Again, up on the corner, up on the corner. When it looks good to you, stop, because a lot of times the last stroke can kill it. Maybe I want to put a little bit more depth right here. So I'll put a little bit more color in. Maybe I want a little bit of this ruby on this petal of this white flower. So while the brush still has a little color on it, I'll put a little bit of that color on the edge of the petal. And then crisp up the outside edge. You want it to look like it lives in its environment. You want it to look like it belongs there. All right, so now then the side view here. I'm going to come in with just soft pink now, and I'm going to wipe out that big C stroke, a big C stroke. A little bit more light, and another C stroke. and another C stroke. That gives me that feeling of volume. Now then, push up, blot the brush, and pull down to create, but leave that nice little shadow I just left there that helps that petal to look like it's cupping. See, you start lifting before you get there, and you get these nice little shadows that happen. All right, so here are those V's I was talking about. Sometimes I like to call them a tent flap. When we were kids, we had pup tents that we went camping, and they shaped, when you rolled back, it looked like these V's. Sometimes it's just a flat stroke. Not a V, but just a flat stroke. Then I can take the wipeout tool on the outside edge of this and crisp up and change that shape a little bit to make it more interesting. And here too, you can come out here, change this shape a little bit. And you're getting that look now of more of a finished painting, right? I still have a little bit of that pink in my brush, so sometimes I'll just use what's left in the brush now and come back and what I call tug its ear, put a little bit of that pink on the edges of some of these shadowy leaves, or leaves in the background is really what I like to call them. They're leaves in shadow or leaves in the background. Now then I want to put the calyx back here, so I'm going to use the scroller again. And I'm going to go with antique green. And I'm going to squat right between all of these petals right here. And squat, wiggle, and lift up. And lift up. And lift up. So tell your friends about this virtual Porcelana, and also tell your friends about her virtual, I think it's a virtual exhibit or competition. I think it's an exhibit that she's going to be doing. Eileen, you may be able to tell them and Maria more about that. I think it's a great thing. Especially, you know, sometimes we don't ever get to see each other except at conventions or something. And this way we can see what others are doing from wherever you are, from all over the world. That's really cool. We need to support our organizations and take care of each other, love each other. It's because of you who paint that we have this lovely art form. Now then, I'm going to finish these out, and I'm going to do what I call a blast of light in just a minute, but then it'll be finished. I've went over, no, I'm not even in an hour yet. Okay, I'm doing good. And of course, you know, I would take this after I'm done here and hold it in my hand and look at it a little closer, and if I need to, refine something. But I have found that I have to wear glasses now because I've tried painting without them, and it's not a good thing. So wear your glasses if you have to. Now then, I'm just wiping out this light where that ball is going, and then I want to lighten that center. You don't want the center the darkest thing on your rose. That is not a good thing. Now then, sometimes I'll use my finger and just get out that light, a little bit more light here. I call that my educated finger. It knows where to push the light. After 34 years of painting, you learn. And teaching teaches you a lot as far as what to do, what not to do. My students here at home and I, sometimes we experiment and we go, well, that worked. Sometimes we went, nope, that didn't work. Now you see, we have here a reflected light, a coarse shadow, and an extreme highlight on that flower. And that's a good thing. We have to create form, and one of the ways that we create form is with light and shadow. All right, now I'm going to put a calyx on this bud using antique green. Wiggle and pull, wiggle and pull, pull. Now a little calyx at the bottom. Not calyx, but actually that's the rose hip. These are the calyx. Not letting them all end at the same point. And this is a petal that goes to that flower that's overlapping that. So I want to crisp up now the outside edge. And because I don't have background, it's much easier to do. And I like to leave a little bit of what I call that waxy buildup on the outside edge. It just accents a little bit. But I don't want it too heavy on the outside. If I feel like it is too outlined, I'll come back with the brush and soften some of those things down. Okay, folks. Now, I want to do a blast of light and we're done. Not bad for an hour's time, right? Okay, so here we go. Light. Okay, here we go. I'm going to use my wipeout, which is my cloth. And I'm using my actually paper towel. I'm licking one side of it, this side, and I'm going to pull out a blast of light, which will make that rose look much whiter. Gives it a lot more light and much whiter. The same thing here. I'm going to tap out, though, some light there and here. And tap out with the brush on the darker one. Now I have to make that light make sense. So this is something I do that's different, I think, than a lot of people, is that I paint it all in and then I come back and blast out the light. The reason for that is that the petals are underneath that light. So if I paint the petals first and then wipe out the light, then that light always makes sense. It looks like it belongs. If you do it the other way, sometimes it doesn't look like it belongs because you don't have the petals there that you're wiping out of. Now then, just blend. Here, on this one, soft pink or soft rose, and wipe out a strong light, and you can still use your finger. That time I didn't have any cloth on my finger, and that's because I didn't want this too white. I want some of that color left. So now then, see that light moving through the painting. Well, there you go. There is a painting of a white and pink roses. So when I do a white rose in a painting, it's always the focal flower. Because no matter what you try, because it's white, it will be the lightest and it wants to come in. And you can change the outside shape with your outside. Thank you. I appreciate you watching. And are there any questions? Sorry, I went off the screen for a minute. Are there any questions? I don't see any. Well, thank you so much for letting me Okay, let's see here. Letting me do this for you. I see you now. I appreciate what you've seen and watched, and Eileen, thank you, and Maria, thank you. I'm looking through the comments now. I had you off so I could see what I was doing. Let me get to the end of these comments. There's a lot of you guys. All right, I'm going to finish this, and you're welcome. And I appreciate you watching. Enjoy, and I will put a picture of this back on when I finish it and fire it. And I would be firing this to 016, which I don't know. Usually I fire about 1500 degrees. That's Fahrenheit. So you can convert that to your Celsius, which I'm not good at telling you what that is because I never use it. So anyway, I appreciate it, and thanks. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And see you along the painting trail. If you have a question, now's the time to ask me, because Eileen can translate it for me. Merci beaucoup. You're welcome, Eileen. All right, y'all take, if you want, real quick, let me show you another thing while y'all are still looking or whatever. This is something that I did that's more of a modern design. And what I did was a border, and this is all in pink. But I thought I would tell you about this color out here. This is ruby and brown mixed together, which I think is a beautiful combination. And then I worked from dark to mid-tone to light on the outside border. So just thought you might like to see that little one there. And I appreciate it. You take care and have a blessed day. Bye-bye.